Welcome to the Working Well podcast. I'm Tim Boris, CEO of Fresh Wellness Group. This show explores the diverse aspects of workplace health and personal performance. On the Working Well podcast, we dive into the foundations of what makes wellness work in workplaces around the world. We connect with corporate leaders, executives, and industry experts who are helping make life more awesome at work and home. Join us to learn workplace wellness best practices, personal performance tips, and access resources to jumpstart your personal and corporate programs. Shane Wenzel is the president of the Shane Homes Group of Companies and the Namesake. As an industry leader, Shane's responsibilities include strategic direction for the companies, policy advice for the building industry through Build Calgary, and political involvement through the Alberta Enterprise Group on the economy. Shane's background in sales and marketing comes from growing up with two entrepreneurial parents, Cal and Edith, and years participating in a business advisory group. On the personal side, Shane is a bit of a tech junkie and social media influencer on various platforms. He's also part of the LGBTQ community. So Shane, thank you so much for joining us today. It's amazing to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to our chat. Tell me a bit about what the last year has been like for you. This is a question I always ask everyone at the start of the show. It's not like it's been a different year, but tell me what your experience has been like.
What a great way to start. You know, this has probably been the most challenging year of my entire life. But when you start off in this business, you don't think that some sort of event like this is going to happen in your lifetime. It's usually business as usual with a few rocks thrown in the road. And then this past year, boom. We come back. My partner and I, we came back from a vacation, and you didn't have to isolate at the time. So of course I just saunter into the office the next day when we get back, and all of a sudden we're talking about COVID and COVID protocols, and you're sitting down with your management team and you're going over what these protocols are. By the time you're done, I mean, you've now effectively tried to figure out how to run a remote operation. How do you keep people safe by distancing them in the cubicles? Because we ended up going with a split shift schedule. And, I'm being asked to leave the office because that's what the protocol was, is that you got to go home and you got to isolate for 14 days. And, that worked out okay because the provincial government made that mandatory about a week later. But, what was kind of normal or average, you just got turned on your ear quickly.
Well, and I think it speaks to the versatility and flexibility of business that businesses were able to adjust that fast to what was going on. And when you have great teams and great people, you make it work.
Oh, we made it happen. We sent our IT people out looking for computers. We were probably about a month and a half away from having, the correct infrastructure for handling all of this. And that was fun, but it was also scary, like you said. You're into the great unknown now.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people say 2020 was about, I guess, coping, if you would say that, figuring things out. What does 2021 look like for you?
Well, 2021 is surprising to me, largely because of last year. You keep thinking, there's got to be some sort of fallout from this, because in our industry, we were quiet during that initial lockdown. And I think a lot of that was just people being uncertain as to where things were going, and and they kind of resorted to just staying at home and kind of cocooning it away. And for the first time ever, we watched as a spring market for sales moved into the summer and all the way through. So it was a very abnormal year. So the natural thought was at the time was it's going to be one hell of a rough year because who knows what's going to happen. And leading into this year, I said the same thing: is you have to see some fallout come from this because it can't not happen. And so far, I've been happily surprised. You've got people out there buying houses, and probably for a number of reasons that are more personal to them.
Well, and you make a great point. There are so many different circumstances and so many different reasons that people are downsizing, upsizing, moving laterally, and we're still figuring this out, what life looks like these days. So I think I'm interested to see where your industry particularly, but all industries go.
Oh yeah, for everybody, but I'm obviously very concerned here. And like I mentioned, for their own personal reasons. But is it a trend? I don't know if it's so much of a trend, but when you have months on end to actually live in your home, the thoughts that run through people's minds are, do I have to go back to the office, or can I work out of the house? Do I need a home office? We've even sold houses to people who are moving their entire operation into the basement of their house because there's only 3 or 4 people, and there's some cost savings there. But I think a lot of people realize that if they were in cases living in a smaller condo, that they wanted something larger, or they wanted to move into a single family home because they wanted the extra space, or they wanted a backyard. So is it a trend yet? I don't know. Ask me that same question in a year and I might have a better answer. Right now, I'm just going to say it's kind of the fad right now.
Good way to put it. Yes, because while we can look in that crystal ball and see what the future is like, I don't know. Well, no one really knows what it's going to be like. We can see where it might be heading, but then again, we didn't see COVID coming a year ago, so who knows what's next on the horizon.
Yeah, and that's the thing. As long as we can get past where we're at right now, get past a lockdown, get past vaccinations, and see where the normal or even the new normal lands.
Excellent. Well, and yeah, people will figure things out, and life will go on, and business will keep happening. It just might look a bit different than it does now. And on the people side, construction is rarely top of mind when we think of health and wellness, and this is a personal wellness, personal performance podcast. Mm-hmm. So people might say, well, why are you having Shane on? Like, how does the construction industry, what are they doing in health and wellness that warrants having you on the show? But I really like to have a variety of people on the show, because most people do think of corporate office downtown when they think of wellness programs. Mm-hmm. Tell me a bit about, what does health and wellness mean to you particularly, and also as a company or group of companies?
It's actually a very large priority. We run our business based off what we call a balanced scorecard. We place our people, our process and technology, our customer, and our profitability at the top of the scale. So you can imagine in our particular case, where half our staff are in the office and the other half are out in the field, either supervisory, construction staff, or even our salespeople. So we had to spend a lot of time communicating with people, and more than what we would typically do in that particular situation, because again, it's that great unknown. People are surviving based on fear and not knowing what's going on. So, I mean, we spend a tremendous amount of time walking up and down the hallways, getting out in the field, just seeing how people are and making sure that they're aware. If you need some professional help, we have access to that. If you just need to pick up the phone and talk, hey, we all have cell phones, so please do so. But you really had to make sure that they were okay, and you had to allay some of the fears, So, I mean, in the case of the show homes, I mean, we limited the amount of traffic going inside. We made sure that our staff had masks and hand sanitizer, and they really understood what the rules were. And same thing with our field construction staff. They had the masks, they had the hand sanitizer. They were spreading out our trade partners from overlapping in the houses. Again, just for everybody's safety at the time.
Yeah, and it's not a complicated concept, but I find a lot of companies don't do it, is the communication side. A lot of things just get handed down and be like, this is what's going to happen. And when you can have a conversation and engage people in the process and really ask them, what is it you need? What can we do to help? That goes so far. People are people, whether it's construction or downtown office or remote field site.
Well, it's so crucial, and I think that's a part of any business's success, but definitely during those times, you had to pick it up. So, I mean, that was a part of everybody's job on the management team was, communicate, over-communicate, do whatever you can to make sure that everybody's okay, right down to our customers. I left them out there. You had to talk to your customers and just reassure them things are going to be okay. No, business is not going to stop. We're going to continue on, and your house is going to get built, and we're not going anywhere. Because that was a definite fear that even they had.
For sure, yeah. When people don't know, that uncertainty is everywhere. They are scared. A house is one of the biggest investments you'll ever make in your life, and if people are scared that that's not going to happen, stress levels go up even higher.
Sure. Yeah, so trust me, there were lots of conversations going on to help allay any of those fears.
As they should. And sounds like you did a great job at it.
Well, we did okay at it. I mean, now that we've gone through it once, I mean, there's certainly some things that we would change and we would improve upon. But again, when you're in the great unknown, you're just kind of throwing things out there as much as you possibly can, and hopefully you're finding the right solutions.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that got it right the first. If you look back to March or April last year, we were all just figuring things out as we went. But if you do it with that genuine interest in making things better for your team and your customers, I don't think you can go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we might do something different, but yeah, that's great. Now, especially when we talk about the construction industry, and in my business, we've worked with a lot of field sites, particularly oil and gas and oil sands camps, and safety is top of mind. And we think of that when we think construction, whether it's homes or gas plants. The idea is safety's top of mind, but where does personal health and well-being and the more soft side of the safety, if we look at HSE, where does the personal health side come after the safety? Like how is that changing in the industry?
I think it's changed a lot for the better. I've been at this for 31 years now, and I've seen a tremendous amount of change in safety over the years. Because the vision that I think a lot of people had of the construction industry was likely very true. That grizzled old construction guy was working on your house, and that was certainly the way it was when I came in. And, I think about 15, 16 years ago now, we finally got the safety codes that implemented within the industry that we needed. Because it was relatively unsafe. You weren't using the proper PPE on sites. You weren't, like you could literally walk out there in just your regular street clothes. And, so that was one of the most major improvements that we'd seen. And, it was welcome. It was really welcome. So, that with, some appreciation through COVID of, spacing people out a little bit more and having the additional PPE was just one of the best things that could possibly happen, even right down to the customers. I'd seen show homes where we have people packed in there and largely because they're out there for viewing. That's great. We have this wonderful thing called the internet, and one way that we were able to accommodate people then was even just having virtual tours. It was right down to the point where in a couple of cases we sold a few homes strictly online. And even for their color selections inside the design studio, we were walking around with an iPad, making their selections for them because there was a definite fear that, what was going on with the great unknown of COVID. So we were able to accommodate that, and it can only get better from there.
Absolutely. If you're looking back to January last year, would you have thought you'd be selling homes completely online, virtual, through video?
No, and I get to give kudos where they're due. We have a phenomenal team here, so we were well into virtual tours, and we were moving along with the digitizing, a mostly paper process. We just needed a little more time to complete it. But I mean, that's where it's going because people expect convenience. They want to manage their life from their phone or from their desktop computer, and they want to do it on their hours. So we have to accommodate them.
Absolutely. COVID basically put the industry, technology forward a whole decade in a matter of weeks. Mm-hmm. And I tend not to say it's went forward 10 years. It just caught up to the current time because most businesses were operating from a technology standpoint what it was like 10 or 15 years ago. Yes. So much paper, so much manual processes that didn't really need to be there or could have been changed, but there was never really an incentive to do it at the time. And I think this pandemic created the situation where we had to change, and it happened fast, which is great to see.
No, I tend to agree with you there. It's one thing that it's been limiting in the industry at times for how far we were behind and how we're trying to catch up in cases. But it definitely did move at a faster pace when you really had no choice and that was your focus. What's always interesting is I'm a bit of a stats nerd, so of course I like market research. I like to make decisions based on what we find out from the research that we do. So, we proceed cautiously because we're not sure totally where people want it to be. And that's, again, why you have customers, and that's why you gather information from them so you can learn from them. And that's why I called, what some people might think trends more like fads. Let's see when we can get past all this, how people's attitudes have really changed.
Yeah. And to go back a bit to what we talked about on the health and wellness side, I completely agree with you with the safety changes that were made from the PPE, and that when I was in high school and university, I worked on some construction sites and doing demolition and cleanup and some paving crew. I look back and I'm like, man, how am I still alive in some of the things that we did, and what passed for norms? As you said, the grizzled old veterans would be like, oh yeah, make sure you don't do this, or you get your arm caught in that. And there was no shut off or safety locks or anything. And so to see that progress is great.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that as like, if we go along like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's the foundation of like, you got to be alive to be well.
Well, that usually helps to perform your job.
Yeah, for sure. And with the last year, mental health has been a huge aspect of the change. So how has that been rolled out at Shane Homes, or how have you seen it happen? I guess you would say the mental health side.
Well, again, there's always concerns, and what we've, again, really have to be open to that communication. And I mean, it didn't stop just because we got past the lockdown, or rather the first lockdown, by summer last year. It's continued on the whole way through because there's still fears out there. So again, you have to remind staff that they do have access to certain resources. And if they need to talk, I mean, your door always has to be open. And it doesn't matter whether they're in the office here or they're out in the field. And again, kind of right down to the customers as well. Even when they come in for visits, I mean, we do expect them to wear the proper PPE, and we want them to limit the family that they come with. Because, in certain cases, with certain ethnic groups, they come in with 8 people. Well, we can't have 8 people in the design center. But, I think it's good for, good for them to not be overwhelmed that way. And it's even better for our staff because, they have to feel safe doing their job.
Those are things that a lot of businesses haven't had to manage as much in the past, is with the stress level high of employees and customers, plus the extended challenges of this pandemic after a year. Many people are just burnt out, and their fuses are about this short. Anyone that's customer facing, I think, finds it that much more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, there's more roadblocks, but you do what we do as best you can to accommodate it. Again, if I go back a year ago, we were meeting on this weekly. At least an hour or two every week for the first while, and now we still get together even monthly to discuss: are we doing things right? Should we consider changing things this way? The next topic to cover is, okay, if things open up, then how do we manage vacations now? Because I don't think anybody ever thought of that, and the mental health of people not being able to travel. Well, man, they want to travel now, except they can't have half the company gone at the same time. We still have a business to run, so it's going to be a balancing act for sure. And we want everybody to get out there and enjoy life again, because you're right. I mean, fuses are definitely short, and people are mentally exhausted.
Yeah, company trip to Mexico, something like that, right?
I'll tell you what, that idea has been floated. Maybe not Mexico, but just sitting there saying, do you shut down the company, or do you try and convince our entire industry to shut down for a week or two during the summer? I guess our own informal little lockdown, so everybody can just go away.
Yeah. And once I'm one of those people that can't wait to get away too. And I think there are so many people, and the travel industry will be booming once everyone can get out there. On the note you had said earlier, you've got about 50-50 field staff and office staff. Is that correct?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah. How do you manage the different challenges and demands on the people side of, especially around wellness, with regards to field versus office?
That's all individual. I mean, you do have to manage it that way. Fortunately, and like I said, we have a great management team, so it's not just limited to say one HR person. I mean, it's everybody's responsibility. So again, you always have to keep your door open and you can keep your cell phone on because they might call or they might pop in any time of day. But I think the field has done extremely well, although they are definitely just as exhausted as everyone else. And some people have been through. I don't want to pick on the older generation, but we got an older generation that seems to be a little more calm and a little more relaxed with it because they might have experienced something like this growing up. Not necessarily a pandemic, but some stringent lockdown rules. Whereas the younger generation, I mean, this is fear based, and it seems to they seem to get their information from a movie out there. So the level really depends on the individual more than anything. But with those open lines of communication, I mean, that seems to have done the best for all of us here.
Yeah, and one of the things we hear from other clients too is that the field sites will often say, "Well, head office gets all the perks, and they get this and they get that, and they're and then what does the field site get?" And so, how have you seen that happen? And I guess how do you keep the education and activities and different programs going in for field staff?
With a great deal of difficulty. That's always the problem. You're trying to find the balance for everyone and treat everyone equally. So it's top of mind, and that's again why we still talk about this monthly. Is I just go around the table with our management team and say, how are we doing here? How are we doing here? When you get to the field, how are they doing? How are the service people doing? A little stressed out because for a while there we were shut down. We weren't going into people's homes. Simply based on fear and cases rising. So it's finding that happy balance. So you go back to where we were even a couple of months ago. We were doing split shifts with our staff in the office. So we'd have half of them come in from 7 a.m. till 12 noon, and they'd work a few hours when they got home, and then the next shift came in at 12 to 5. Field staff were going all the time, but at least they were able to spread things out and not worry so much about trades being on top of each other. So I mean, we were able to create a little distancing that way, but you still had to go out and you still had to visit them. Make sure they were doing okay. They were floundering a bit at times, and again, your service staff, you're trying to keep them busy, even though they're not going into customers' homes. And then now they're playing catch up on it. So now you're trying to balance out the workload on top of that. So there's a lot of moving parts, and that's why we have to get together regularly and discuss.
And in the construction industry, you work a lot with sub-trades, subcontractors. Have you been able to balance culture within your employees versus the subcontractors?
That's actually been relatively easy. We've got a strong base of trade partners, and we've been working with a lot of them for a number of years. And in doing so, I mean, they share a lot of the same core values that we do, and that's why we find that we have the best team around there. So I mean, we're sharing information, we're sharing our protocols, they're sharing theirs. They have a good idea, we might have a good idea, and we're implementing them in conjunction with each other. So it's nice when you have business partners like that you can share those ideas and make it work for everyone.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I would love to think that a lot of companies have that relationship with the different sub-trades. I've seen both sides of it, so I'm glad to hear that lots more companies are keeping up that great communication on the sub-trade side.
They're roughly similar in size, and some of them are a lot smaller, so they're looking for a little more guidance. We're happy to do so. That's why we call them trade partners.
Yeah, exactly.
Trades.
Well, and you use the word values too, and that's huge. If we're not running your business based on values and bringing in like-minded partners, it causes a lot more challenge than it's worth.
You're only so successful if your core values don't align.
Yeah. Now you had mentioned it a bit before, calling it fads versus trends. Mm-hmm. But if you had to put that crystal ball on, looking at the industry and what's been going on the last year. What do you think it looks like in 2 years, 3 years?
2 years, 3 years, you're going to do a lot more transactions online. Our processes are going to become far more digital. I think I always try and reference it as to, you take a look at Amazon and online shopping, and why aren't we closer to something like that? Now, I know a house is a larger purchase, and some people may never feel comfortable other than going out on site, view a show home. But why not? You have an entire generation. You and I were talking before the show about kids, and my son, he might be that generation that's absolutely comfortable with purchasing their home or condo online and making their selections online. Will that happen in the next 2 to 3 years? No, but I think we'll inch closer to it every day.
How much of bringing your whole operation in-house do you think will stay even once people start going back to the office, or it's okay and safe to go back to the office?
Well, I think you're going to see a bit of a shift that way. Do I think it'll be the majority? No, I don't think most people are really predisposed to working out of their home. They need the motivation. They need to be around other people or colleagues to help keep them moving forward. So I can see how that might work in some situations. I can't see that working in the majority of them. It's kind of that same question as retail. Do you think malls and bricks and mortar are dead? No, because we went to the mall for a different experience. We went because, we wanted to window shop, to kill 3-4 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday. Well, I don't think the workplace is really a lot different. I think what you might have to do is adjust some things in the workplace and proceed with a bit of a different attitude. We've seen how vulnerable people can be over the past year, and nobody's bulletproof. So I think you need to create some different spaces, and you probably see a bit of an evolution in leadership style to be a little bit more collaborative. And for the customer's sake, I think you can see a bit of a shift there too, is creating that total customer experience, something that's a little more personalized for them. So I think that'll even change as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of the talk of the hybrid workplace where people will go back for a couple days a week and then work from home the rest of the time. A lot of the surveys I see on that tend to come from the tech companies, and I think they're quite a bit skewed to companies that are set up to work from home. But how do you see that happening in your business?
It's not impossible that some roles could be done that way. They could be done remotely, especially if you have a digital process. Our biggest challenge that we found was trying to move that paper file from, say, somebody in drafting design who was working the shift tomorrow morning, and where the hell is that file this afternoon? But if it's digital, then it's much easier to work on. And those are all options we're going to have to explore moving forward. But certainly you can't be a site supervisor, and you can't be a service person, from your couch or from your kitchen table at home. You actually have to be on site to physically see what's going on and manage the people going to and from. And it's there's certain possibilities, like I said, even with online sales and even with our salespeople. They could literally write a deal from someone's kitchen table if they were just sitting there talking about it. But it's much easier and I think more comfortable for people to come into the show home to at least expand upon what their thoughts are, at least for now. 10 years from now could be a different story.
Very true. Now, you've held lots of different roles within the organization. You started sweeping floors essentially and working your way up. How has that impacted your leadership style?
Well, it's helped create it. If I go back in time, even to those days, my father started the company with his business partner. So they're starting a company from the ground up and through its infancy, and I came in shortly afterwards. So you can imagine rather, his management style is he always jokes, he calls it a passive dictatorship, even though it was a bit dictatorial. But that's what it was at the time. Whereas I think I would be far more collaborative, because this company and the group of companies rather has grown so immense that you can't have your fingers in every piece of the pie every day of the week. Literally impossible to. I'd never go home. So you have to rely on a lot of people. You have to hire some good people around you who are better experts than you are in specific areas. So that lends itself to a more collaborative management style. I'm still the final word on a lot of the key decisions, but I'm looking to my team for the best advice around. So that's how we move forward, and that's, I think, how you get the best out of your people as well, because they know that you're open, to questions on why we do things the way we do and how we can possibly improve it.
I agree. And you've talked at a few different points throughout this discussion about communication and being open to that. And I think when we talk about wellness, being comfortable and feeling safe in an environment to express your opinion and
Yes.
talk to leaders across the organization and feel that your ideas are heard. Most people don't think of that as a wellness thing, but it's a huge part of it, especially from the mental health side. Mm-hmm. And I love, that's again, one of the reasons that I would say Shane Holmes has a great culture. Mm-hmm. And I love that. Love to hear that from leaders, because we need more leaders like that.
I agree. And trust me, I know a lot of my counterparts, and some are cut from the same cloth or a similar cloth, and some certainly aren't.
Well, and you even said that with your father too, was that more dictatorial style. And I think some of that might be personal, but also some of it's a generational thing too. And it was a lot more accepted at that time. This is the way it is. You come to work, you do this, and you put in your time and you go home. Mm-hmm. Where I think these days there's a lot more collaborative, a lot more discussion, and especially in the information, call it knowledge worker field.
Well, I mean, they want to feel like they're a part of something. So opening yourself up and being vulnerable that way, can actually create a much, much better, longer lasting relationship. And they appreciate it because they do feel like they're a part of something.
And so what would you say is the biggest people challenge in your business then?
There's always people challenges. It's never a boring day. No, I mean, you're trying to find a happy balance between 4 different generations working in the workforce for the first time ever. That wasn't happening when I joined the company, because you might get your foot in the door in your early 20s and you were retiring in your early 60s or at 65. Now with people's life expectancies, you don't rush them out the door if they don't want to, and they still want to work. So we've had some situations where I think our longest running employee just retired last year at 72, and
fantastic.
He still wants part-time work.
Great,
but he's got a wealth of knowledge, and he's one of those rare ones who had absolutely no problem mentoring the people below him to make them better. And I think that's probably the best, most benevolent thing that any of your ageless workers could possibly do is not take that knowledge with them as they go out the door, but to share it with everybody else coming up underneath of them, because that makes our company better. That makes the world a better place. So I encourage it. But having 4 generations, that can be a challenge, because what's important to that 21-year-old is not as important to that 65-year-old. That 65-year-old knows he or she is doing a great job. And, if you give them kudos, say once a year, they're happy with that. And in cases you get a 21-year-old who you might have to do that to every week, because that's how they were brought up. That's what they expect. They need that feedback constant. And if they're doing it wrong, gosh, can you sit down and show me where I'm doing it wrong? And I promise not to make that mistake again. So it's a balancing act, but it's fun.
Well, and it goes back again to the communication, and I love the mentoring aspect of that and the sharing of knowledge between those generations and passing it down, whether it's even just life knowledge, but also specific work knowledge. The more the generations can work together and have those experiences, creates a much better culture in the organization. And from a business standpoint, the knowledge gets documented and passed down.
Sure it does. And and that's the joy of it all. Is that you get a better company, a better product, and a much more satisfied customer. And your staff, they enjoy coming to work every day.
Yeah, very true. Now, You've built this group of companies now. You've started, I guess 2017, started a land development division.
Yes.
And so what's next? What is Shane Group of Companies doing in the future?
Well, I mean, that's always a good question, and it's hard to tell at times where it's going to be, but the next vertical might not even be in this city. It might not be in the home building industry. There's lots of different ways you can go. And if you would have asked me 31 years ago, could you imagine that this is what it was going to be like, where you're adding in multifamily and land development into the group? I would have said no. Who knew? We just built single family houses, and that's the way it was. But I can see it expanding, and I mean, you want to create, like I said earlier, you want to create a company that's timeless and creates that great customer experience. That individual customer experience. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of it change. And if it's digital, if it's portable, then it can be transplanted to any city around.
Very true. Yeah. And I forget what the stat was, or the study I saw. It was something like 50% of jobs in 20 years don't even exist right now. And so we don't know what that's going to look like in the longer term. And we could be doing something we have absolutely no concept of right now, but being able to adapt and evolve to what's going on is important.
Exactly. Well, again, go back 31 years. Could you imagine that you'd need an IT department in your company just to ensure that all the technology can talk to each other and it turns on in the morning when you get here? No, who knew? Yeah. So we added while we were going through all of this was a real live person for online chats. That role didn't exist years ago, but it's necessary now because you have so many inquiries that way. So even 10 years from now, could there be a whole department full of them? Could there be less salespeople? What kind of AI will you see on the job sites putting houses together? I mean, I've already seen what automation can do to kitchen cabinets, where you're plugging in a CAD plan into the system, and they're going through and cutting cabinets out of boards where there's a 4% wastage. I mean, that's significant when you consider that used to be 20%. I go back 10 years ago, and that's when we started panelizing all of our walls. I mean, that did a great thing for the environment and for the green movement. And, we've never looked back ever since, but, you've done a lot of great things just from that. And that's automation in a factory. That's not people doing it. So 10 years from now, who knows, maybe it'll just show up on site. And we'll just drop the house on a foundation.
3D printed homes are a thing right now, right? So whether it's 3D printed components or actual 3D printed homes,
yes,
there's the future.
Very well. Seeing that, and I keep seeing the computer making these things, and it's like, wow.
We just hope IKEA doesn't get into 3D printed homes, because then we'd have to put them together, and it would be a nightmare.
Nobody wants that. That's where we come.
No. So before we wrap up, what's your top advice for corporate executives and aspiring leaders out there?
Yeah, I saw that, and I mean, that's a great question. I always go back to a saying I have: earn it, don't expect it. And I've certainly seen enough people go through this industry and various others over the years where they want my job within 5 or 10 years. That's where the earn it, don't expect it comes in. You have to take time. You have to learn a lot. I didn't get to this role just because my name was on the door. I had to be capable of being the president of the company and providing the leadership that we needed moving forward. But that didn't happen overnight. It took me a lot of years, virtually 20 years to get to this lofty position. And even now, it can still seem daunting. You have a lot of people relying on your opinion and your knowledge for how they proceed. That in itself is a challenge, and you have to be confident and know what the hell you're talking about before you do that. So my advice is: earn it, don't expect it. Take that time and learn what you have before you get the top job.
Great advice. And you don't get to that point. You have to learn along the way, and what all the experiences that we have turn us into who we are at the end. You can't just take that shortcut.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been wonderful. And where can people find you? I guess I'll say that. LinkedIn, your website.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're looking for the Shane Holmes group of companies, they're on virtually every platform out there, from LinkedIn to Facebook to Twitter to Pinterest to YouTube. I'm only on so many of them. You can find me personally on LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube or Instagram. So the company, that's simply Shane Holmes. You can find them there, or you can find me just at Shane Wenzel. Made it easy for everyone to hunt me now.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much, Shane. And I look forward to the next time we get the chance to chat. And thank you again for joining us on the Working Well podcast.
Tim, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Working Well podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. We love to hear your experiences and how you've applied tips from the show to your daily life. So please keep us posted on your progress. To stay up to date with new episode releases, make sure to subscribe to our mailing list by emailing podcast@freshgroup.ca and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And once again, I'm Tim Boris with Fresh Wellness Group. We'll see you on the next episode.